All right, welcome back. Thank you, Casey and Cal. We're here at LTC. You can follow us on social media at LTC Lowell Math, on YouTube, the Facebook, and the Instagrams. And you can find us also at www.ltc.org. And I'm going to introduce our guest right now, Diego Leonardo with LCCE. How you doing, man?
Good, good. Thank you for the introduction.
No problem. So I know you work in a local organization, like I said, LCCE, right? Can you tell us a little bit about your organizations and the programs you do?
Yeah, definitely. So LCCE, it's a nonprofit that started with a focus on education, but due to the fact that we tend to come here to this country and don't know where all the things are located, we wanted to educate people to how to find resources. So LCCE stands by Latinx Community Center for Empowerment, and the empowerment portion is to make you independent so you can have better socioeconomic growth, have representation in the city, as well as providing that portion to the family that it can be implemented to everybody. So this is the reason why we have LCCE as the local community.
Oh yeah. Like a little bit ago, you were talking about Folk Fest, right? And the diversity of the cultures over here. Can you tell us about the diversity of the Latinx community right here in Lowell?
Yeah, definitely. So the Latinx community in Lowell is very interesting because we usually tend to use the label Latinos and just try to highlight a couple of members like Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, and it pretty much stays that way. But the way we're seeing it is that Lowell is very diverse in the Latino label as well. We have representations from Colombians, we have Brazilians. Those are bigger numbers, and we have the Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, and then it trickles down to small numbers of pockets of Latinos that we have Ecuadorians, we have Venezuelans, there are Central Americans as well, have Hondurans, El Salvadorians, Guatemalans, and then we have people from Peru, and it's really diverse because also we have indigenous people from the Latinx countries. So that is also creating another division that it becomes not just the Spanish language that gets there, but also there's native indigenous languages that people are speaking in Lowell, and that makes it more diverse and interested in itself. And that's why you don't see a community that it's so unified like you will see it in Lawrence, that it's pretty much just a dichotomy between Dominicans and Guatemalans, so the bigger groups, and that's a representation. But over here we have such a diverse and dynamic group that it's really difficult just to unify everything on that label itself.
Yeah, and just kind of to elaborate a little bit of that. I know you mentioned some of the groups, so like how like the Dominicans and Guatemalans were the most prominent, for example, in Lowell. Are there any prominent groups here in Lowell? What are the prominent Latina groups here in the city?
Yeah, so the prominent groups are four pretty much. We're talking about Puerto Ricans, Dominicans that are being present in the industries as well, because you see a lot of food industry members are Dominicans, so all the restaurants are usually owned by Dominicans. We have a lot of barbershops that are usually owned by Dominicans, so they are the ones that you can feel their presence as well. Then the other pocket of big representation is Colombians, and they have a very interesting history of how they came to Lowell, because they come from a specific part in Colombia. It's called Medellin.
Sí.
And that's due to the textile industry that they had in Medellin. So they were able to transfer their skills to the mills over here, and that's how they migrated to Lowell and make it a place for them to live. And it was due to the mill work. So it's very interesting. There is a couple of people I can highlight in that history, and especially Sebastian, who is a ranger for the Lowell National Historical Park.
Yeah.
And he will be able to explain all that history that it's happening for Colombians. And then we have the Brazilians. We don't really talk about them as Latinx that much because sometimes they get disassociated because they don't speak Spanish. They speak Portuguese.
Yeah.
And that it's another big number of population that we have here in Lowell. And especially there's areas that used to be Portuguese predominant, and now they're more Brazilian. You can see the Brazilian flags in there, especially Sacred Heart is one of the places that you'll see more Brazilians in there, and those are the biggest pockets that we have in Lowell.
All right, and I want to say, like, just to elaborate on that, where's your background too?
My background?
Yeah, and when it comes to, like, the Latino community, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, talk about you too a little bit too.
Sure. So I wear different hats. My background really started on biomedical sciences. I hold a degree in X-ray. So I'm an X-ray tech back in Guatemala, and then I came to the States and did biotechnology. And I love research, cell culture, and so I'm pretty much into the science. But the reason that this organization started, it's because I started to see that there's no representation in the science field for Latinos. I usually found myself to be the only person to work in the actual science work. You usually see them as support. Usually they're cleaners or they're maintenance, but you don't see them into the science work. And that pretty much opened up my mind to see if this is happening in this industry, the community is not that far from it. And that's pretty much what I do. I'm currently a lab manager for pharmaceutical companies.
See?
And that's what I do on your
day job.
On my day job, and then my passion, it's really about helping the culture and representing. And one of the things that I like to say is that once I came to the States, my bubble was burst, because I was always growing up in this bubble that everything had to be perfect. So if you remember the picture perfect movies from the 70s, that all the houses were all the same, and like the same cars that we're having, all the parents were coming in, and then the wife just received them with the kiss. That's sort of what I can illustrate my life to be. I was just into that portion of me being raised on that very conservative way, not to really getting outside of my boundaries, raised on a way that education was a bigger portion, and then religious beliefs were the other ones, always going to church, then different prayer groups and things like that. And once I came to the States, I came to a realization that we were so diverse. And one of the things that I struggled the most growing up was with the color of my skin. I was the darker of my family. I was usually seen differently. And then when I came to the States, I was like, I'm not the one that is different now, which is cool. And I felt like home. And then that's pretty much what I started seeing, that there's so many other things that we had to consider, and not just what you see usually when you get raised. So that is how I can explain my comments and the background of coming to Lowell.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because for me, when I was growing up, I grew up in Puerto Rico, but when I came here, like I wasn't even planning to come here. I ended up just deciding, like, last minute on senior year, it's like, I'm gonna go. And I remember still to the very last, like, months that I was in Puerto Rico, I thought it was gonna be temporary. And like, I remember people telling me in school, like, hey, why don't you learn English and maybe use it later? I was like, I don't need English. I live in Puerto Rico, and I speak more English at work than I ever thought I was ever gonna speak. So actually, that was like a really interesting thing that happened to me. So yeah, let's have another question here for you. So what is something that you think it's important for people to bear in mind when considering the Latina issues, and that might not be obvious or thought about all the time?
So one of the things that we were talking earlier is that we usually get this stereotypes built up, that how Latinos are being here, the portrayal of a lazy person, and we have to see the complexity of the community itself just by talking how diverse it is, but also the backgrounds that they're coming. There's usually a thing that we started understanding, that there's a lot of talent in the Latino community. It doesn't get tackled. And it's due to not knowing where to go when they need the resources, or usually the people that they hang around don't know more than what they do, because it's very consuming just to have a job, and then usually people end up having 2-3 jobs. So it's really hard for them to get out. So those stereotypes starting to become part of what the community is like. These people is just working, they don't get involved into activities, they don't go here, they don't need this because they never showed up, and things like that. That bad stereotyping, it's really making us understand why are we talking about that in our community. And we had to address those issues first in order to understand the complexity. Once we understand how people is seeing us, we need to break those barriers. And by breaking the barriers, one of the things we did at LCCE was an event called Meet Your Neighbors.
Okay.
And that's because we wanted to bring up the way of how people were doing entrepreneurial stuff in the city of Lowell. And there were many, many businesses that we didn't know that were Latino owned, and usually you don't get to see that. Just interact with them in a regular basis, but you don't know what goes on behind the scenes. And that's why we wanted to bring them on the table and make sure they get lifted and seeing what they're doing and all the things, because usually just see Latinos, they have restaurants, but there's also people that it's being leaders for the community. There's people that have different type of businesses, and there's also people that it's working in bigger companies that they have good positions or leadership positions in those areas. And that's what we wanted to lift up with Meet Your Neighbors, because it was just a part of knowing the Latino community is here. Let's make them feel.
And outside of that, that's like a great event. So any other events or programming that you're working on when it comes to like empowering the Latino community?
Yeah, so one thing we are working currently is on the Latinx Festival. We call it Hispanic and Latinx Festival. It's going to happen on October 15th at the North Common Park. And what we want to do is embrace all the diversity of the Latinx, because we all need to come together. We need to celebrate our Latinidad, being Colombian, and bring your culture, bringing your Dominican moves with the merengue. And like, we want to bring all the Latino food trucks as well, so it can become a food truck event. And having live music. We're going to have live artists. There's a Dominican couple that they sing some ballads, and they're gonna be coming, cantando así suavecito al oído. And then we're gonna have some salsa music that is gonna be coming along with a class. So there's gonna be salsa class there, so you're not just feeling that you're there listening to the music, you can also feel the beats on your feet. And that is something that we are working the whole Latinx community. It's not just LCCE, it's pretty much everybody, all members of the community, that we feel the need that we need to celebrate our Latinidad, and that's a way of doing it by doing this event. So I'll keep you on the loop. I hope you can show up and show us your salsa moves over there.
Those are not that good, if I only tell you. Kind of a little bit stiff nowadays. I wanted to ask you though, how is Lowell different from other cities?
Well, Lowell is very different from other cities due to the fact that it's so diverse, and I love to see that. You usually go to places and then you see all the diversity of people, different faces that just makes you feel welcome in a way. That's how I was working at this project that the National Historical Park has, that it's called One City, Many Cultures. And one of the sentiments that everybody had from around the globe was that Lowell welcome you, but then he throw you a slap on the face and said, "You're not from here. Wake up," right? And that's what we want to make sure we elevate here in Lowell, because you have so many people from all over the world, and that has to be celebrated. And by not just celebrating the food, the music, the culture, but also the things that they are providing to the community, and how we can create a better sense for everybody. It's one of the things that we work, but we like about Lowell, it's because the change is starting to happen, and we can start seeing it just by the way the city council is now, that you have more representation from different neighborhoods. And there's neighborhoods that are super diverse, and there's some that are not as diverse as others. And so Lowell makes it very complex and very different from other places. And that's what I like about Lowell, because it's a place that you don't really need to go all the way to Boston. You can just find home everywhere here in Lowell. You have the water with the river. One of the things that I always remind myself when I go for a walk or a jog, I see the water, and that kind of lifts you up. And Lowell has that thing that nobody else has, that water that you can see and enjoy with your family, and those walkable areas as well. So that personally, I think I would be biased comparing Lowell, because I really like Lowell. But that's what makes it different and a welcoming place.
Awesome. So we're getting close to like the last of my questions, a couple more. So how would you like to see Lowell grow and change? I know you talk a lot about the change already, but if you, I mean, I think you want to go more specific and elaborate on that.
Yeah, so what I like to see in Lowell is mostly the youth getting more involvement. I feel that we lack the fact that we don't have a lot of youth spaces or culture that can celebrate youth. We are glad here to have two wonderful youth helping us with the cameras, but where are the rest of the youth people? What are they doing? I think we need to elaborate more into referring to the arts, music, poetry, literature. We also need to get more sports happening in Lowell, and I think probably one of the things we need to do most is find a way that we can get our youth being involved in activities that are outside just to go into school, because they can provide. We're talking to the future. They can be later the leaders, but if we're still holding those positions, if we don't allow them to grow into those places, we're just gonna lose them, and they're gonna be ending up going elsewhere and not spending time in Lowell or like Lowell the way we like it. And that's what I feel we should start doing, like getting more youth involvement. If the Folk Fest is something that we are celebrating, let's get more youth to celebrate with us, and maybe try to hear what they like, and maybe we can bring that up to them as well, because I feel that is what we need to put our efforts on right now.
That's great. Also, it's thinking about that, like in the spirit of Folk Fest, what you're talking about, the October 15th, right?
Yes.
That's when the October. It's almost like a mini Folk Fest for like the Latino community, right?
Correct.
So it is awesome. So I think we're coming to the end of what we have here in the questions. So I have one more question for you. It's pretty straightforward. Say, how can folks at home learn more about the work you do?
Well, folks can follow us on our social media. We have a project that it's called Lowell Latinx Archives, and we are elevating and lifting up the oral histories of Latinx Lowellians. So that is something I would like to really embark on and tell you.
Yeah,
that,
do it. I'm interested now. I'm intrigued.
So Maria Abar, she brought this really great idea into how can we make the Latinx community be more close to each other and celebrate their differences. And that's by bringing the history of how they came here. So we have a website, a Facebook page. So you can follow us at Latinx Center, and you'll find the Latinx website. But we also have the Lowell Latinx Archives, and you can follow it on Facebook as well. And we have the story of Maria Cuesta, which is a professor that she's from Cuba. And she's telling us her story, how her upbringings were into Lowell, how she came to Lowell and what made Lowell home, and she's still till this day being at Lowell.
Nice.
And that's what we are trying to create right now, and we're working in collaboration with the National Historical Park, with some professors at UMass Lowell, Professor Ferrant, which has been the great forefront for us to gather those histories, as well as other professors that are coming in. Belinda Duran, it's also been the enabler of us connecting to the right people making this happen. The Center for Lowell History is also helping us in there. And we have so many other people that I'm forgetting right now, but I would like to mention that they're collaborating with us to making this happen, because there's so many good history here that we don't know, because usually it doesn't get told, doesn't get outside of the family circles, and we want to make that into perpetuity, so it can live into an archive that stays there forever. So if you have experience of family member, somebody that was here more than 50 years ago, and they would like to tell how Lowell was before, and the challenges and the issues that they learn or they have to face at the beginning, and then moving on to what's Lowell till this day. And those are really different contracts that we are seeing throughout history. And one of the things that we like to do at LCCE is that we want to learn from history. We want to learn from experience, because we don't want to replicate the same mistakes that our ancestors did or people in the past did. And we want to learn from it and see how else we can embrace those challenges to make the community more strong united and welcome the newcomers that are coming here. So that's a side note into getting to LCCE.
Y también si lo puedes decir en español, si hay gente escuchando que habla español.
Claro que sí. Nosotros nos encantaría si ustedes tienen información de alguien que les gustaría contar su historia, por favor contáctense con nosotros. Tenemos la página web de latinxcenter.org, latinxcenter.org. Pueden contactarnos ahí en la página para más información. Y de verdad queremos encontrar todas las historias de las personas que han estado aquí en Lowell y que nos cuenten qué ha sido la forma de ellos ver Lowell al principio, cómo está Lowell ahora y qué más les gustaría ver en Lowell. Y eso es lo importante de este proyecto que se llama Lowell Latinx Archives.
Qué brutal. Está bueno eso. Well, thank you. I think that's all we have right now.